We're going to go ahead and take a look at lesson 2.6, equations as formulas. It's a continuing of solving equations, but this time we're going to look at equations that are formulas. And what I mean by that is that the equations, you'll see here an equation here, but the equation is related to some value or some situation we have in the real world. And this here's the first one, is the blood alcohol content. And so we're looking at B equals negative 0.015 T plus 2.84 N over WG. It looks very complicated. The thing is, we have to know what these values are, what these variables represent. And so in this first situation here, we have this equation for blood alcohol content. And then we look at a specific situation where we're talking about this equation for a male. It's 190 pounds. And so this is the equation that we get right here. But notice, to get this simplified formula comes from this over here, where you have 190 gets replaced for W, 0.68 for min over here, and then you divide 2.84 by that, and you end up with this, and it simplifies. So now that we have this simplified equation, it's an example of maybe what a forensic scientist would use to determine how many drinks someone has had. And so looking at this example for a 190-pound man, you can see this would be the equation where you have your values, 2 hours, and you're substituting in those numbers, right? These numbers, the 0.09 and 2, go into the equation or the formula, and then you can solve, and notice you get 5.5 drinks. And so you're solving for the number of drinks. Now, if you had to do this over and over and over again, you would want maybe a new formula to use. And so what we would do is take your original formula and then solve for n, because we're looking for the number of drinks. And so how do we get to this value here? Here's where, again, I'm trying to isolate n, but I have the second variable. I would add 0.015 to both sides. So you end up with B plus 0.015 T, and then you divide both sides by 0.022. And so you end up with this n, where n is the number of drinks. And now you have this new formula we can use. When you're given B and you're given T, you can substitute into that formula, and now you have your answer of 5.5 drinks, or 5.45 if you round, 5.5 drinks. And so that's the power, the advantage of solving a formula for a different variable. You can then create a new formula. And so in this case, we could repeat this process for a 190-pound male, 0.11 in 3 hours of drinking. You would say that was about 7 drinks when you substitute and get your calculator to solve that. And so let's look at another formula that we see in statistics. So this is not going to mean anything to you right now, just weird letters, but you have Z, X, and then these symbols here, the mu and sigma. They're Greek letters, and so it's an interesting looking formula. If you're given some values, just substitute into that. There's your X, there's your mu, there's your sigma, and you end up with a value right here too. So easy just to substitute in. You don't know what the number it means. Try this again, solve for, this time you have these other situations that I'm just trying to solve for X in this case. So notice you multiply both sides by 0.2, add 1.9 on both sides, and you end up with this answer here. But again, we were looking for X, so it might be more convenient to solve for X, so it ends up looking like this. And to do that, you would multiply again both sides. Instead of by 0.2, you would multiply both sides by sigma, and then add the mu, and you end up with X. And so the last part of this lesson is looking at this factoring part. It's a skill we end up using to simplify equations or formulas. And so you have to recall the distributive property. A parentheses B plus C is AB plus AC. So sometimes you want to go back the other way. Take that completed part and then rewrite it in what we call factored form by taking out the greatest common factor. And so here are 3 examples of how that looks. And so we would use a technique like that many times to solve a problem like this, where we're solving for T. Notice T appears twice, and so what you would do is factor the T out and then divide both sides by q plus p. You'll get more practice on your written homework here, but again, it's just a skill we use that comes up many times, is factoring of the greatest common factor. It's important to acknowledge that. The rest is, I think, discussion. This is what you're going to do on your discussion there. And so that's what we have here. If you want to look at this to solve for n, see if you can end up producing this, would be a good exercise also. But that's what we got.